Hi, I'm Corey. This is my wife Marie and Doug Cooper, and we're from the Fort Boise Garrison. And today we're at the Dry Creek Historical Society celebrating a special occasion for them. And Doug will tell us more about it.
And we're here today to celebrate the rededication of the granary in the Schick Ostalasa farmstead here in Boise, Idaho, in the Dry Creek Valley. This has been a project about 8 years in the making. In the last few, Boise State Construction Management Department headed up this project on behalf of the Dry Creek Historical Society, which owns the Schick Ostalasa farm. It was, like I said, several years in the making, and we found the construction expertise and really the vision to make sure this happened. The granary is a typical architectural style of that time, and some of the things...
Hi, I'm in front of the granary here at the Dry Creek Historical Society. They've just refurbished it. I want to tell you a little bit about the outside of the construction. When I grew up on a different, very old farm, there was a granary just like this, and it had the framing on the outside. If you notice, all the framing is on the outside of the building. I thought it was decorative. It was so cool that they had the framing on the outside. Who would have thought, right? Turns out I was thinking like a 20th century girl, not a 19th century farmer. There was a reason for it, just like there's a reason for almost everything they do. The grain goes on the inside of the building. It creates a great deal of pressure. If the boards were on the outside of the framing instead of on the inside, the grain would actually pop the boards off the outside of the building. So, how clever they were, and while it is decorative, it's also practical.
So Marie told you about the outside and the pressure the grain created inside this little building. Also inside, they have these tensioners. And this is to also help relieve some of that pressure, this building being full of grain. Now there's 3 chambers in this grain barn, and for both barley, wheat, and oats. And this is all just part of that relief of the strain of all that tons of wheat that could probably go into this room.
I'd also like to introduce some BSU CMA current president, Kyle Hosley. He's the BSU CMA VP. Yep. Okay. Jason Bohl, he is a BSU CMA. He was the superintendent on the project. Michael Bohl, his brother, but he was also the BSU project manager on this project.
He's not here. He cannot be here today.
Oh, he couldn't be here. Okay. I'd also like to introduce Frank Eld. He's a BSU graduate student, and he's right there. He's waving. He is working on our barn. We are trying to get the barn going, so he is also called the Barn Whisperer, but he's a graduate student at BSU. I'd like to introduce Fort Boise Garrison, but they are in civilian dress right now. Doug Cooper and Corey and Marie Klein. Thank you for coming out. And then we have a bunch of volunteers out here, as well as I'd like to introduce Lisa Ahrens. She's the town manager for Hidden Springs Town Association. And her husband, who is John Ahrens, who's past president on the Hidden Springs Town Association. If I've missed anybody, I apologize, but we do have a bunch of volunteers out here that do our mowing and picking up leaves and taking care of out here, so we appreciate you all. The Schick Ostalasa farmstead dates back to 1868, when a one-room homesteader was moved onto the property by Philip Schick. He then went on to build the outbuildings that you currently see and expanded his property to nearly 400 acres, raising sheep, horses, and cows. In 2008, a group of residents concerned about the loss of the historic farmstead joined together to preserve what we see today. Since then, the Dry Creek Historical Society has managed this property for public viewing as an example of agricultural life in the 1800s. We currently have Boise School District 3rd grade school tours in the fall and spring. front porch concerts, old time farm day, history hikes, and many other events throughout the year. We are open every Saturday from May through September for the public to tour the longest continuously inhabited home in the state of Idaho. A couple years ago, we were lucky enough to meet Dr. Casey Klein, chairman of the Boise State University Construction Management Department. Thus began our partnership with BSU and our granary restoration building project. When we started, this building was leaning over, and if you get a chance to stop by that table, there it shows you what the pictures look like before, through the process, and after. There's also candy and waters over there. Anyways, the building was leaning over, and we knew it did not have long to last. As you can see, through this wonderful partnership, we have been able to historically rebuild the granary and have the opportunity for it to last another 150 years. I'd like to introduce Dr. Casey Klein, chairman of Boise State University's Construction Management Department, to tell you about the granary.
EMA during the construction phase of this project, and I just kind of wanted to give you guys an idea of all the fun that we had when we were doing this. Our original design intent, which you'll be able to see on this board over here, was to take the overall building, take it apart piece by piece, label each and every part so that any part that was still good we could still put back to keep it as historical as possible. Slowly through the process, our plans had to change. Initially, again, we were going to take it apart piece by piece, so we took thousands of pictures of it to make sure that each piece could go back. We were actually able to take apart the entire building in wall panels, and we were able to stack it off to the side so that everything, when it went back up, could look exactly the same. Our original design intent was to obviously redo the foundation. Originally, it was sitting on railroad ties with no support underneath. So over time, those started to rot out, and the building got that nice 30-degree angle that you guys had seen before. So we took it apart. We had a plan to redo the entire roof and an entirely new floor. Once we got the wall panels apart and we decided to start excavating, about a foot down, we discovered why it's called Hidden Springs up here. We hit a lot of water. So the original intent was to use grate beams, which are just rectangular prisms of concrete. We were worried about, with all that hydrodynamic pressure, that it would start to roll the beams. So we had to go in and get a new design approved for the foundation. So now the foundation is a thickened edge all the way around, 2 feet 6 inches deep, and then a slab over the top with PVC penetrations to allow the pressure from the water underneath to come out and not push up on the slab. After that, we decided to get some railroad ties and some pressure-treated beams that are actually sitting on top of metal brackets, so they'll never actually hit the ground at all. And obviously you can't see the concrete. Our idea was to make sure that it still looked historical at the end of the day. We completely redid the floor system. We wanted to keep it as historical as possible and make sure all the parts look the same, but they don't make the same stuff that they did 100 years ago. So for example, if you go into the far room, it's a built-up floor system with 1x8 tongue and groove boards. They don't really make that in rough cut cedar anymore. So we actually went out and we bought a router bit and made 1x8 rough cut cedar into tongue and groove boards. That saved money on the project overall. It was a great management decision by the team that was on it, and it helped us out a lot. Then as we were reconstructing the building, obviously, if you look at some of the studs, they're not exactly plumb and straight, but they weren't that way when we came here. So we wanted to make sure that it still looked the same. And yeah, exactly. We also intended to run barbed wire all the way through, and that's what we did there. So initially, when they would put all the grain into the barn, they would use barbed wire and just come along.
Like a tightener.
Yeah, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, you have the exact name for it. What was the expansion cable?
Expansion cable, yeah. So obviously now it's not holding any grain in there, but we wanted to recreate the building exactly the same as it was before. There was a lot of little things that we had to do that weren't historical to make sure that it could still last an extra 100 years. The entire roofing system is still cedar shake as it was before, but there's actually a waterproofing membrane all around the outside to make sure that it doesn't rot out the roof boards like it did before. And all in all, it was an incredible learning experience for us. We were all, you know, we may have shook our head and said some words at some points, but at the end of the day, you know, we got to be a part of something that's going to last another 100 years.